All right. Hello. Um, Hello and welcome to another IncusOS live stream. This week we're going to be looking at adding some extra debug APIs to applications. But first thing first, going to be going through what happened over the past week. The last live stream, we were all kind of looking at adding full disk encryption. So that's been done. I did the remaining cleanup after the live stream and sent the pull request up. So those are the changes we can see here for last week. So basically, I think all that stuff was on stream, the logs functions were, and I was basically, I think, wrapped up the stream at the point of actually having the drives unlocked during boot and then some of the CLI and the other pieces. So that's all been done. It's all landed now upstream. And we've then done a few more things. So yeah, Java encryption also in documentation is not covered correctly. And if we look at what happened after that, then it's mostly bug fixes, I think, from that point on, with one small feature that was added as well, but not really tested all that well yet. So typo in the clustering guide. Someone on the forum noticed that there were some issues there if you just followed the instructions as they were written, so that's been fixed. Incus, when using a SAN for storage, so either over like iSCSI, NVMe over TCP, or Fiber Channel, it uses QCAR2 and QEMU-NBD to handle some of the storage. And we had an issue with those QEMU-NBD devices causing issues with the IncusOS storage API. So that's the fix here to just hide them. Then a few updates to just pick up new dependencies. I think that probably was like a migration manager version or something like that. More fixes to the Incus clustering guide because it was still wrong. Then a small new feature to support suspending the system, so not just shutting it down, but actually suspending it. So we can call now trigger suspend, so the suspend command, if it's also in the CLI, to cause the system to go to sleep, and then if you've configured wake online, you should be able to wake it back up and get the system responding again. There might be some interactions there around like, what happens after resuming from suspend. Like, do we need to do a full reconfig of the network or something to get a clean state again? I don't know. Currently, we've not done it, but we'll wait for user feedback on that. Like, most of my systems are actual servers, and suspend is not really a thing that they do, or at least if you try to do it, I don't expect it to go particularly well on those kind of machines. So it's mostly for home labs on smaller systems, folks using laptops to run IncusOS and the like, where this is interesting. Also, suspend is not super easy to test in VMs typically. VMs tend to have their own suspend mechanism, which is kind of different from the CPI suspend state. So not something we can easily test automatically in VMs either. Anyway, there was a small bug in the publishing of, during promotion and demotion of images on the image server, so it's been fixed to add the missing signing code. Another update for dependencies. And then we're already at what we did yesterday, so that's just new Golang CI lint came out, which, as tends to be the case, caused some issues with new checks. So we've done some cleanup around that, overriding some checks, fixing some of the other failures, and kind of just cleaning things up that way. And like in parallel to, as I'm saying this, I'm actually looking off screen at a build of IncusOS running right now, because there's a community contribution to add NPU, Intel NPU firmwares to our GPU support package. And I'm just doing a test build to make sure everything works correctly, because I think it's the first time we did with a subfolder within user-lib firmware. I wanted to make sure this was handled correctly. Anyway, yeah, just checking that right now. Okay, it failed. I think I've got some memory issues on this system. I keep getting some weird segmentation faults and stuff. I think my memory is quite overclocked on this box. Like, it's overclocked to the memory specs. I'll probably have to tune that down a bit to get more stability, because I don't want a machine that's randomly seg faults. anyway, it's exported partway through an image build. I'm just gonna check. And I can actually show that on screen. So if I move that, drag that here, that was my test build. It just blew up on a sec fault on dpkg, which is not really that common. So I'm pretty sure that's not a software bug, that's a memory bug almost certainly. So I'm just checking here the actual files I care about for the NPU stuff, making sure if they landed correctly. So we can see AMD GPU and whatnot, and yeah, Intel NPU landed at the right spot, which is what I wanted to make sure. User lib firmware Intel VPU. So that's the Intel NPU driver stuff and firmware. So they landed where we want them, which means the pull request, as I've got it on my system, is fine. So I can just push that over what the community member submitted. Just cleaning it up, and then can merge it over here. Anyways, the other thing we've landed are instructions for running IncusOS on macOS. So that's through UTM, and that works surprisingly well. The main issue is with nested virtualization not quite working, because you need to use the QEMU backend to get IncusOS working properly. But then if you the QEMU backend doesn't do nested virt, the Apple native virtualization backend does do nested virt, but it doesn't support either secure boot or VTPMs, at least not through UTM. But for containers, it works just fine. For anyone who just wants to play with IncusOS, this API, and just see it work, it works perfectly fine. And it's, yeah, that's a good way to test IncusOS on ARM64. I can actually show that. Got that system on the KVM here. Yeah, there we go. Let me just see where my mouse is, but that's always a bit trippy. Yeah, there. Okay. So if we go, is it like it's on a KVM, so the mouse acceleration is kind of all over the place and causing some issues, but let me try and actually get to that icon. There we go. Oh no, that's the install. Okay, so that's already been installed. In case it's not obvious that I have no idea what I'm doing on a Mac. I have no idea what I'm doing on a Mac. Also, I can't see the entire screen because of my microphone being in the way. So that makes it slightly trickier to actually pick the down application I want to run. There we go. Yeah, so this one doesn't work. Can delete it because it was native authorization for testing. This one is just IncusOS running on that M4 Mac with oh right, and the disk on this one is slightly corrupted. Okay. Anyway, for anyone interested, I can actually show you real quick how to do it. So if we delete this guy, create a new VM, virtualize, it's a Linux, 4 gigs is fine. We'll do 4 CPU cores. Don't really care much about any of the display acceleration. That's not really relevant. We want to boot and install ISO. So it's an ARM64 IncusOS install ISO for Incus. Can continue. Our usual drive size is 50 gigs. Doesn't really matter, but just doing things that way. Continue. Don't care about shared. Do need to edit the settings now, because there's a few things we want to change. And then once you get on here in the QEMU tab, you can turn on TPM, can turn on the balloon disk as well, balloon driver as well. And then going down a bit, there's an option here to preload secure boot keys. We don't want that because we want to load ours. And I think that's the only change needed. So you can just do save, run. And then it does one boot to load up the keys, which is what we should see now. There we go, keys have been loaded. And then second boot, it actually boots up into IncusOS. And it's gonna go through the install. It does something slightly weird with the screen resolution for some reason. Like it increases the window size as if it's picked up a high resolution. But then the actual console resolution itself is pretty low. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on with that. But anyways, it's fine. We can see the IncusOS console anyways. Okay, this is installed. I don't remember if there was like a way to kick out the media easily. Yeah, there is. Okay, CD, DVD, eject. Doesn't let us do it, or something is wrong. Okay. I've usually just been shutting down the VM and removed it from the config. That tends to be easiest. So shutting down the VM, closing that, doing edit. There we go. And we want the CD-ROM drive, which is the USB device here. That's the CD-ROM drive. Then just delete. Yeah, remove this. And save. And start it. And this time we're booting from the OS drive, so for the install. Here we go. And I should be able to get a shell on here. Switch back to local console. I think I had already one called IncusOS. I should just remove that. And then add IncusOS as a remote, and the IP address is 192. There's an update, so we're just waiting for that to reboot. Okay, we've got both images, A and B side, present now. Anyway, it's 192.168. There's another rest of it. Okay, booting back up with network, system ready, 64.4. Okay, so adding that, and then remote switch IncusOS, and should be able to do launch Debian 13 container. And here we go, it's running. Just go check that it's got internet access and everything, but I don't see why it wouldn't. Yeah, works just fine. So anyway, we've got the instructions for that now added in the IncusOS install docs. Like we've been doing some work on that over the past few months, like especially on hardware. We've got all of the instructions now for the different vendors here. But also all of our traditional platforms, which include, in this case, UTM. The somewhat recent work on supporting installations on systems without Secure Boot also meant we managed to do installation on Hyper-V these days, working as well. So we also have that up and running. Anyways, that's for everything that happened over the past week. So not that much, but that's also because some stuff are like pretty significant chunks of work are still in process in the background. So this one is the one we should be able to review and merge at this point, because I did the review. Yeah, so I can just approve, auto merge, and then approve it. So review, approve. And that way, once it does a test build on our infrastructure, it will also automatically merge. The other pull request that should go green, I think today is the plan, is the multipath for the root device pull request. That's been taking quite a bit of time for Matthias to get it right. There's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of stuff happening in early boot, which is pretty unpleasant to work with. So just a bunch of logic needed, and as you can see, there's still some bumpiness around it. But we're basically done with that, and then once that's done, we've got the rest of the milestone to look at. So if we go and load up the work planned for the end of this month, which is, as always very optimistic. We expect a bunch of those items, like especially towards the end of that list, are gonna get bumped to next month. But at least the priority order is mostly fine, and so we're gonna try and go through those in that order. So the multipath is the current thing being worked on by Matthias. Then we've got some cleanup, because we've noticed LVM PVs showing up as the primary ID for disks, which is wrong. So I'm gonna fix that. There's another kind of similar issue also with the kind of that drive identifiers we use in different places causing issues during install sometimes. We want to fix that one. I think there's a decent chance that this one and this last one are actually the same thing. So I'm hoping that when we fix this guy, we can close the other one after the next daily run, basically. Recovery passphrase, we've noticed some issues with that too, where like when you do get a passphrase prompt, there's little to no feedback about whether the password is correct or not. If it's correct, after a few seconds, the prompt resizes and you can kind of guess it that way. But if it's wrong, it doesn't really prompt again or do anything. You need to reboot the machine. That's just not very good user experience. I want to see if we can fix the early boot logic in the initRD to be a bit better on this front. And then there's some storage stuff. So effectively allowing converting a standalone RAID 0 single disk pool into a mirrored RAID 1 pool. And there's some more storage stuff that Matthias will be looking at. So there's this one, then drive selection, way to reinstall the machine. There's some more stuff done here, like pull log device, special VDEVs. So we've got a bunch of storage related stuff that we want to look at on top of some other items like ability to have multiple versions of the applications, and then also some kind of mechanism to roll back a bad network config. So there's quite a bit of stuff to do, given that February is a pretty short month. We basically only have like today, tomorrow, and then the entirety of next week. I would be, looking at the list, I would be kind of shocked if we got further than this. Definitely expect the rest will probably get moved over to the next month. But anyway, there's still quite a bit of progress and quite a few things we've got lined up for IncusOS. So anyway, open PR, this one is approved, waiting for tests to complete for it to get automatically merged. And the topic for this live stream is this guy. So that's the debug API for applications. The general idea there is pretty simple. We've got some primary applications, typically Incus, Operation Center, Migration Manager. They run on the system. Occasionally, you need to debug something that went wrong. And pretty often, debugging that kind of stuff involves getting a bunch more files from disk, files that are not necessarily exposed through their respective APIs. So like the best case, like the kind of the main thing we'd want to do normally is actually expose that through the application's API as much as possible. Like we do have like a logs API and that kind of stuff on the Incus side. We'd want to expose any relevant files that way, but that doesn't always cover everything. Like for instance, for the Incus instances, we would probably want to use the logs API as much as possible, and that should be able to pull the config and all of the relevant log files. But if you also have something that needs to pull, what would that be, like network logs or that kind of stuff, it's not going to work quite as well. And there's probably a bunch more things we'd want to add that may need to run additional commands to capture actual like additional debug data and send it back to the user. The thing that's a bit special with that API is that usually we're designing like basically full-on APIs. We would have something like 1.0/application/name/debug, and then a bunch of targets for the different kind of debug info that you want to pull out. In the case of the applications API, we can't do that very easily because we want the same. It's kind of similar to the services API where you want all of the services to offer the same kind of API endpoints. So the general idea is to implement not a get, but an actual post to a most likely 1.0 applications name :debug command. So like effectively a debug action. And the request would then be able to include as whatever makes sense for the application. Like in the case of Incus, probably some kind of, action or something like that, potential extra parameters, and then the application code itself can own that struct, and it can be different between applications and just needs to be documented correctly. So that's kind of the idea. It shouldn't be particularly difficult to implement that at the IncusOS level. And then the more complex part is going to be actually implementing those different, well, the debug actions that make sense over time as we see more bugs and more things we need to debug. That's where we might be missing data otherwise. Okay, so let's switch over to the code. Let's switch over to my branch as well. Rebase that on current main. There we go. And I'm gonna go and poke at the API a bit, just doing major kind of calibration for this. Okay, so slightly bigger for everyone to look at. And now let's go look at IncusOS. Actually, I have a first change I need to make because I just noticed some test failures again. What is it? Yeah, the list of disabled stuff, we need to disable no linked lint because it keeps giving us some false positives. It's a very useful check that I like to run, but we should just run it manually whenever we think there might be some no lint statements that are no longer relevant, instead of having it be a linter that's always run, because it's giving us false positives sometimes. So I'm just gonna add that as a commit. Typo, sure. Okay. All right. And next we're gonna be doing some API work. So let's go look at the REST API, and we're looking specifically at the API route with server, and it's going to be under applications. We've got debug, factory reset, restart, and restore right now. We're going to want debug here as an action, and polling and endpoint call applications debug. Now if we go look at API applications, there we go. We can base it off on something like restart, for example. That should be close enough. Just need to copy paste that kind of in the right order in here. So that's the main application itself. That's factory reset, so that would go before that. Let's put it here. So target is debug applications, and it's gonna be, so like it's an action. It's gonna be post applications post debug, and perform debug actions or retrieve debug data for an application. Triggers a debug action or debug data capture. Something like that. We want the application name, and the actual data is basically unknown, so we can't really describe it in the Swagger because that's really application specific. Let's see what we have for, like, for example, for factory reset or something. What's the response parameters as get application? Okay, if we do factory reset, which was done here, this probably has some input, maybe. I'm not sure what factory reset actually does. It might not. Yeah, I don't think it does. So anyways, we can kind of leave it as it is for now. Missed the function name. Okay, so it's not restart, obviously. This is debug. And the rest is basically, we get the application name, we load it, so that part is the same. And then once we load the application, we want to hit a debug function call. Actually, we want something pretty similar to services, where we want the application to be able to give us a debug struct, and then we unpack into that, and then we call it with the debug struct. Let's go look at how that's done exactly in services again. If we go here, I think there's like a struct function somewhere. Maybe not. Or do we have per endpoint things for services? Does that work again? No, it doesn't. Okay. Okay, so if we want to look at put, for example, how does that work? Load, get. Oh yeah, so okay, so that is that spot. We do call struct, and then we call the function that logic. So that's basically what we want to replicate here for the debug call. So like we want something kind of like that. We just fix the formatting. Here we go. Okay, so we actually don't, obviously it's not service, it's an application. It's gonna be app. We'll do a function called debug struct to actually get the struct. And then we can set up the decoder on the request body, do the decode, and then lastly we call app.debug with the context and the data. And this this needs to be able to return some output. And what do we do on that front? Because it can be just about anything, which is not, it's not ideal. Let's see. Yeah, I think we're gonna have to yeah. I'm kind of on two minds of what to do here, because on the one hand, we could just mandate that it needs to return our normal structured, like a normal Go struct, and then we take that Go struct and we just like we effectively just return, like pass it as JSON back to the client using normal that normal sync response type mechanism we have. That would work fine in many cases, but if we need to return binary data, like if the endpoint returns, you know, a tarball of a folder or something or not, then it's going to be pretty unpleasant to do. So I'm tempted to make it kind of lower level. So instead of doing that, being able to return like a full-on response. And if we do that, then that should let us handle other cases, including sending files, including sending raw responses, that kind of stuff. Another thing we could do is literally pass through the HTTP writer and just say, okay, well, the debug endpoint has to handle the actual HTTP response and its problem. I don't love that. I'd rather this returns a response in the style that we can handle, and that would effectively let us just do the call the renderer at the end, so this, and call it done. If we do that, then we need to make sure that we don't do this, the setting of the content type, because it might well change based on what the application is on what the logic, debug logic is. So instead, we're going to have to do the slightly more annoying thing of actually putting it in every one of the errors code paths, because all of those are JSON, so we do need to have it set. But when comes the final call here to debug, we shouldn't, because that could return anything, and it's effectively based on the response type here. The right content type should be set. So I think that kind of makes sense API wise. Let's see what that looks like if we try to build it. At this point, it's just complaining about the missing functions. Yeah, debug struct we're missing, the rest is fine. Okay. So let's go and implement that in the applications package then. So inside of struct, there's the actual interface. Is it sorted? Looks like it might be. Was it? Yeah. Okay, good. So up here we can add debug and debug struct. Debug struct is basically returns anything. It's fine. And debug, so it's like context, context.context, and then data, which would be also just a struct of any of an unknown type, effectively. And then the return value would be a response, I think is the type, and then an error. If we look, where's the response package? The response package is inside of internal REST response. Okay, so that's the one. Okay, so something kind of like that. Just need to fix that import path. Okay, it is quite mad because of the basically nothing else implementing it correctly. That's fine. We do have a common endpoint for that, so we can just do a very basic. So here, basically, debug and debug struct returns. That's data. So we can just add the functions at these placeholders for the common case. So this would return nil. And then debug runs a debug action, and this is common debug. It's got the context, so context of the context, followed by data, which is any, and it returns response.response. Like that. So we'll just do null errors new not supported. Actually, there might be a not implemented endpoint. Let's see. Yeah, we can do response not implemented instead. That would be better. So we're actually succeeding the call, but just returning not implemented at the API level. So something along those lines. Now it's complaining about the missing import, which is fine. So REST response. Okay, mismatch. What did I miss? It's in the REST API. Okay. API applications 266. Which one is that? Oh yeah, that's a response. Why do we have this? Okay, there we go. Just duplicated logic there, that was wrong, and we should be good. Okay, so that's all of the kind of boilerplate stuff kind of in place there. Then we can look at implementing it for something like Incus. So let's first make sure that everything looks clean. Okay, I said like this machine is having a bad day today. If I requires, okay, I might need to actually reinstall my linter here. Yeah, I don't have the command of hand. Let me just go like CI, local install, go install this guy. Okay, let's just rerun that. To rebuild it with Go 126. This takes a minute. Okay. All right, a couple of small issues, that's fine. Go in here, we can actually do golang CLint run. Use the fixed target, that should fix at least some of that. And it then points out that the app common implementation, the context itself is not used here. So it should just use that instead. Let's try it again. Okay, unused data, yeah, same thing. It's for the issue of maneuver, you do the placeholder functions, like we don't actually use any of the arguments, so they should just be disabled like that, and now we're good. Okay. So, IncusOS the applications and debug functions. Okay. And then REST API. That. Okay. Need to update the Swagger data as well. There was an issue with the ordering and stuff on this thing. Like it's always shows a lot more changes than there really are, but the relevant bit here is good. So let's see, there's a kind of standard commit message for this. Yeah, update REST API YAML. So I'll just commit that. There we go. And now the CLI is the other thing we usually want to modify to add support for this stuff. So CLI would be CLI application. And then we've got backup. So we're going to want to just duplicate the backup command pretty much into a debug command. That's a generic command. The endpoint is debug. Debug the application is fine. It's two applications, the entity is an application. There is data we need to pass. By default, so don't pass any. And the output, it's not really a file as the output, so we can remove that. Debug command, okay, should be good for the CLI. Just checking, okay. Get it? Yeah, okay. So that's the CLI done. Okay. And there's also documentation we need to do. So documentation, applications, debug. There's already a thing for debug somehow. Unless the debug application. Okay, so that's not really relevant. Actually, it might. Yeah, I think it's one of those we're going to have to do a section per application with the relevant data. So until we actually have the endpoint do something, it's not that useful. So that's going to be one for later. So make IncusOS, just give us a binary. Then just check there should be yeah, the version of IncusOS here. System update check on local admin OS update check. There we go. Just making sure it's up to date before doing anything to it. Update check completed, so that's fine. And if we go look at the system, it is running 2026-02-12. So last week's version 0-19 is from yesterday, so we should reboot. System reboot, yes, and we can watch it do its thing. Okay. And it's on 9. Okay, so that's fine. So that's the current stable version. So if I just try to talk to it, dev, oops, was it like dev dashboard? I think is the name. Yeah. 1.0 OS, oops, OS 1.0 applications, Incus, and then if I post something to that endpoint, not implemented. Now if we push our new binary in there, we should be able to get that to behave. So the IncusOS D binary that we want to send into root, and then usually I do a dev folder in there, which is a temperfast, push the data, and then do the bind mount, and then we can restart IncusOS D. And just need to give it a few seconds to actually start up. Okay, it's done. Now we have something. It shows, yeah, JSON and Marshall null doesn't work, so that's actually something we should probably tweak slightly. I was wondering if that was gonna be an issue actually when I was doing that earlier. Basically in app common, so the default implementation here, returning null is not a good idea. We just gonna need to return something that it can unpack into. So map any is probably the best bet. I guess we could literally return an any, so that might work. Var data any, and then return that. Does that work? Let's find out. I'm always kind of confused, but exactly what we can do with any in some cases. Like it's a bit too magical at times. Unmount, move the binary, push the new binary, bind mount it into place, restart it, and check. Okay, and okay, we're online. Yeah, it's still doing the same thing. Okay. I mean, it's fine in that there's nothing supported, but I would rather it, yeah, tries to at least do something. Okay, so debug struct. How do we actually consume it? So REST API applications debug struct. Okay, so we get that, and then we pass it. All right, so it's gonna expecting a pointer. Yeah, I really have some memory problems on this machine. My YouTube tab just crashed as well, so that's fun. So long as OBS doesn't crash, we're good. So let's try to return an actual pointer. Yeah, see if that helps. Unmount, remove, push, bind mount, pick here, wait. And go back. There we go. Okay, so that did work. That's the clean version of it. Cool. All right. So to get that into the application change. Like that. And so we basically have the endpoint that doesn't do anything right now. I'm gonna have to think slightly more about the exact structure I want, but I've got an idea of what we can do to kind of just check that this stuff generally kind of works the way we want it. We could do so if we go into internal applications, Incus, app Incus, we can implement those two endpoints. Actually, let me get them out of the common one to just have a good, so I can save myself having to write the comments at least. Okay, that. If I go Okay, so the functions are not particularly sorted, seems like. So anyway, let's put them here. Oh, and that's IncusOS. That's another one I want. I want Incus proper. Okay, start, stop, restart, update, initialize. Okay. Fine, so let's put it here. So that's on the Incus app itself. Okay, and so there's the debug struct here. So what we need to do is actually do something type debug struct, and then data is defined as just being a new struct, and we can then return that, something along those lines. And then in here we can do something like I want an action to be provided, like that. And then we could provide additional data, but let's just do an action for now. And in debug, what we can do is we can, we're gonna need to get the data. So the request is effectively, I need to convert it to the right type. Oh, we don't have a type. Okay, I need to move that to its own exported type actually. So let's do, well, not exported, but it's its own defined type. So we call that Incus debug. And Incus debug like that. This can go hang out somewhere up here. It's fine. Okay, and then what that lets me do is here I can do data, and data is supposed to be a pointer to an Incus debug struct. And if it's not, then we're dealing with bad data. Response bad request, errors, new, invalid, request data type. Let's do something along those lines. I'm not sure why we actually return an error in that API. I should change that because the response itself can return errors clearly. So returning an error on top of that is kind of pointless. So I think I need to actually address that. So it should just return an API response instead of doing that and an error. So it can become basically like this. Obviously that also impacts the common one here. That also impacts the struct here. Like that, and then it will impact the REST API as well. Because instead of getting both the response and an error, we literally only get a response. And because we only get a response, we can even do something like this. And just call it done. Okay, some failures in the Incus app. So let's go back to that. That's simply because we need to actually import REST response here. Yeah, that's the right spot. So that's mostly good. And then line 62. Yeah, we do get the request, just don't do anything with it yet. We'll probably do a switch on rec.action. So do case, let's do get logs, something like that as a valid action. And then the default would be return response not implemented. something along those lines. This code path would not actually be possible anymore, so that's fine. And here we could do like a response dot this sync response, something like that. That's the empty sync response, but also response sync response, and then just true and then the data. So it's kind of that sync response true and success. Okay. All right. Response. Oops. SNS. Here. And here we go. Okay. So that's built now. If we go up here, let's do the usual binary swap thing. Can try that. Okay. So if I try it now with nothing, not implemented because the action is not supported. But if I go in here and do get logs, success. If I do something else, not implemented. Okay, so that's working pretty well. And now for get logs, I mean, ideally, get logs would be a binary kind of endpoint. I mean, assuming we would want to do something like get logs, but that could generate a tarball of I would probably do it as like as a tarball of run incus on top of var log incus. That would give us a decent set of all of the logs basically in one shot. So we could do something like that. Anyways, first thing is doing a bunch of commits because of some of the changes here. So for the basic app commit, this would go in it. App incus would not be included right now, so we can ignore that. That would be in it, that not be in it. And then REST API is not that, but this guy. Okay. Which then leaves us with the incus implementation of it. So this would be applications incus implement basic debug. Okay, and I can rebase this stuff. So that goes here. That goes here. Okay. Let me just check what happened here. Okay, it was still good. Like my screen went blank briefly, so I want to make sure that the capture itself is still behaving, but I see OBS is still seeing the screen, so we're good. Okay. Do static analysis to just see if there's anything that needs tweaking. There is, file not properly formatted, but that's just in that last comment. So it's not too surprising. Actually didn't fix it, so let's run it that way. There we go. Yep. So now static analysis should be clean. Yep. Okay, and let's just try to make this endpoint actually slightly more useful. So let's see. I don't remember the response types and all that kind of stuff we've got. So what do we have in REST response? Okay, sync response, e-tag location redirect headers, plain. Okay. There's manuals you can use to return some pretty low level stuff. There's actually one new one that from the Incus side that I would like to copy over in this scenario. Where is that? Internal server response, I think, is our type. Yeah. And then it's like a pipe response type, I think it's named. Is it? No. Let me check what's happened there. Maybe I'm just, oh yeah, okay, I'm on an old branch, that's why I don't have it. Okay, so if I refresh that. Okay, so if I go look here now for pipe response, there we go, that's the one I want. So let's copy that one over into our REST. I'm not sure how similar the packages are. They were definitely based on the same concept, and I think a bunch of the same code, but let's see. Does that just work? Sure would be nice. Okay, so it builds, so that's a good start. Possibly some static analysis fixes needed for it. Yep, there is. Okay, slightly less of it now. REST response 354, and it was complaining about this. And which one was it complaining to? 367. Yeah, this also doesn't need it. Okay, are we good? Yes, cool. So let's just connect that as IncusOS REST response add pipe response. Okay. And now we've got pipe response. We should be able to try and do something like, let's see if I can figure out the syntax for this stuff. But basically, we've got a bunch of the run commands type stuff in the Incus subprocess API. What I would like to do is run a tarball effectively. That's what I'm trying to do here. Run command with FDs, I think that's the one. Yeah, so let's do that one. So we want to do run command with FDs. We want to pass it the context, so that's why we've got this here. Okay. No need for standard input. And then it does just stud out, so we need to give it a stud out as a pipe. And then name is the actual application we want to run, so it's going to be star. So just dump straight onto stud out, and I want to capture run incus and var log incus. So let's do something like that. Okay, and we need the actual pipe stuff. Let me check how it's actually used within Incus, because I've seen it in review, but that's about it. So pipe response, yeah, it's used for a backup API these days, so that's what I had in mind. Yeah. Response pipe response. It takes, okay, so it's gonna need the request, which is slightly problematic because we don't have a copy of that. I don't know what for. Does it actually do anything useful with the request? Oh, maybe the HTTP headers, possibly. I don't know. Let's see. Does it do anything with the request? Pipe response, sure. So it takes the request, it stores it as a rec, and I don't think it ever does anything with it. Maybe I missed something. No, it doesn't. Okay, well, we can simplify that. This is in the IncusOS code. I'll probably do the same change in Incus afterwards, but there's no need to have it pass the request if we don't need it. So we can get rid of this guy here and remove that. And that should be quite a bit cleaner. Are we still good? Undefined R349. Oh yeah, sure. Let's just read it at this point. Okay. Like that. Which now means I just can pass any kind of reader to it, which is convenient. The issue we're gonna have is kind of streaming type stuff. We need to make it non-blocking basically. So this needs to actually run in a sub-process to avoid potential starvation issue, or like if nothing is reading from the pipe will just stop piping. To deal with that, we need to actually run that one in the background. So just do that. And it basically relies on the fact that stud out would get closed at the end of execution. So we don't really care about the return value, but what we do care about is that stud out gets closed at the end. And then stud out should be so this is just like a pipe response. And we're reading from it as it goes, so we need I don't know what Go supports for that. Do we need like a proper OS pipe? That's always an option. It's probably gonna be the easiest option actually in this case. Yeah, we might do a proper actual OS pipe. So if we do, then so this it gets us a reader and a writer, so like that, and an error as well. So let's do it something along those lines. If we're getting an error at this stage, this is an internal error, so response internal error, and then we want this guy to write onto the writer side, so PW, and we want this to get on the reader side, so PR. Let's see if that actually builds. Doesn't. A few errors, so there's a typo here. Okay. So that is not documented, not defined. That makes sense. It's PW now. Cannot use PR variable of type file as IO pipe reader. Okay, it wasn't okay. It specifically wants an IO pipe reader. Okay, that might actually work. Let me just check the type on this stuff. So what's that like? Yeah, so IO.pipe would actually work in this scenario. So it's kind of the same concept, just no error apparently when it's IO.pipe. And instead of OS pipe, we do IO pipe. And we need to make sure we import IO already. We do. Good. And that builds. Okay, so that's something. Let's try to exec, announce the thing, remove it, push the new build, find mount it, restart the daemon, check that it's done. Okay. And let's see if we get a wall of weird binary data, because that's kind of what I expect at this point. Get logs. Yeah, so let's return the bunch of binary data exactly as we'd like. If we do add.tar, is it a valid tarball? It is. It's a valid tarball containing both run incus and varlog, the varlog output. So that's nice and convenient. We could go one step further and actually compress it too, just for kicks. Let's add that. It will be slightly better. So we can do compress gzip. And I need to look at the docs because I never remember the syntax for this guy. So it wants, we can wrap it on the writer and it will just compress as it goes. Yeah, okay, so let's go PW basically. We should be able to just kind of wrap it effectively. So compressed pipe writer would be gzip.writer, and then we pass the existing writer, which will be PW, and then we send the write to CPW, at which point we need to flush that one first, so close that, and then close the other pipe, and that should do what we want, I think. See? Because it's compiling, so that's good. Exec, unmount, remove, push the new version, go in here, bind mounted, restart, journal. So just see it's running, and now if I do this again, it should be compressed this time. It is, cool. So if I do with ZTVF, root, and we'll see all of the nice files that we want. So that's basically it. That's just worked. Static analysis. Let's see if there's any cleanup we need to do. There is. See how much of that can autofix. Not too much of it. Internal applications. Incus on 77 and 78. Oh, right, because I just ignored the return value from these guys. I mean, there's literally nothing we can do in a Go routine anyways, but we need to be more explicit that there's nothing I can do about it. Okay. And we're good on static analysis. Yay. Cool. So, oops, yeah, wrong. So that's all on Incus. Change this to one file. Yeah. Okay, so we want this guy to be done kind of separately from the rest. We'll just put it like this. This turns into an update to that last commit. It's kind of slow today to do the signing. Okay. All right. And that's what we have for the debug endpoint right now. Now reference applications Incus. We need a section on debugging. The Incus application supports the following debug actions: get logs, returns a .gz of the content of such Incus and varlog Incus. You can run debug actions using, and then I don't remember how we do examples right now. We do reference system storage, for example. what's the syntax? Okay, so we use the backtick syntax for examples. Cool. So let's do that. Incus admin OS system, the system application debug incus data action is get logs, and we want to send that out to log star using. Okay, let's see if the docs are happy. So if I do doc lint, it's fine. Doc spell check, and if it is, then we should be good with this one. And we can always expand it. I mean, the get logs is kind of the most basic one, which is kind of covered already by some of the other endpoints within Incus. But we'll be able to add basically anything else we want and just tweak that list. Yeah, so a couple of issues. Okay. And it's just needed escaping on these guys, and it should be good, I think. Yep, all good. All right. So I can move this file here. Doc applications incus cover debug actions. Here we go. And we're good to go, I think. So pushing that to GitHub. Here, actually, what's happened to... Okay, so the Intel and NPU stuff got merged, so that's good. It was just waiting for testing to complete, so it has now. Implement application debug API, and that's closes this guy 874 and create a pull request. So pretty nice and tidy. You can just go through the commits real quick before wrapping up the stream. But as I said, the first one is kind of racy and gives us some false positives, so we should disable this thing. The pipe response, that's the as simple an implementation of it as possible, followed by adding the basic debug functions into the application interface, followed by exposing that over the REST API. So just adding the extra API route, API handler that effectively loads up the application first. Then once it has, gets a debug struct, unpacks the data from the user into that struct, and then pass the debug struct to the debug endpoint, and has it, and then renders the what's received from that endpoint. That's just the REST API model update, and then the CLI to actually call that. So that will generate a debug command with a -d option that can be called. That will be fine to run the feature. And then actually implementing the endpoint in the case of Incus. So that just, as I said, like it implements get logs. If you run get logs, it just does a tarball, compresses the output, dumps it back out. Actually just realized I could have just put ZCF here and just made my life slightly easier instead of doing the compression in Go. I'm not sure what actually would be the most performant in this scenario, because Go will do it with Go routines and everything, and it might actually be more performant to do it in Go than do it through the CLI. I don't know. Either way, it's just basic gzip. But yeah, just realized we could have literally saved 4 lines of code or something by just doing ZCF here. I might still do that actually, and just push over the branch to make it simpler. and then the documentation. So yeah, let's just go do that cleanup real quick to make it slightly easier on review as well, just because we don't need to look at the compression logic and make sure it's fine. So if we go here, yeah, the gzip logic I don't need to load. And here I don't need to do any of that either. I can just write straight to PW, to ZCF here, and just close PW afterwards. And that should be it. Okay, static analysis, still happy? Yeah, okay, so that is a bit simpler. So I can go and push that into this commit like that. And just want to do a quick test run to make sure it actually still works. So if we unmount, remove it, push the binary, bind mount it, restart the thing, wait for it. Okay. Query, and then, yeah, we're good. Exactly same result. So we can let's push that over. And here we go. So just reset the PR, and we can see the code change to now add the extra API just for the Incus app is quite simple. Just like we need to get the responses in, we've got our extra struct, which could be extended with a lot more things as needed. Implement the actual function here and just have it run that tar command, close the pipe, and we're done. So very, very simple. Should be pretty flexible to add anything that we need. And that takes care of that issue. All right. Hopefully that was interesting. It was definitely a pretty easy one to do, which is good. It's nice when I can actually go from the idea to full implementation, including the pull requests, all the tests are passing and everything, and pushing that at the end of the live stream. So that's always quite neat. And yeah, next week is an Incus release week, so no live stream. It's going to be an Incus release video instead, usually coming out on Friday. And I'll be back to live streaming the week after, and we'll see how far we actually went with the stuff we've got listed for this milestone. As usual, if you've got any questions around any of this stuff, feel free to leave them down below. You can go in our community forum and chat as well. If you'd like to get your hands like involved in this project, we've got a bunch of issues open, anything from new features to bug fixes to tasks around CI and testing, that kind of stuff. So, feel free to join in, and yeah, hope this was interesting, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.